The creepiest true crime cases are sometimes the ones with the most unexpected twists. In these unusual cases, the actions of those involved can baffle investigators and deepen the complexity of an investigation beyond normal boundaries. Number 5. Christine and Nick Skubish vanished without a trace on June 6, 1994. Although both were later located, it was in tragic and mysterious circumstances that Christine would ultimately not survive. Christine, who went by Chrissy, was driving on Highway 50 with her 3-year-old son, Nick, in the back seat. They were on their way from Sacramento, California to Carson City, Nevada, when their car slid off the highway down to the bottom of a steep ravine in a remote area of the Sierra Nevada mountains. The area was wooded and isolated, and the bottom of the ravine was not visible from the road. The stretch of highway was known as the Bullion Bend, a nickname dating back more than 100 years to the California Gold Rush. The original road in that location took a sharp twist, requiring stagecoaches to slow down. Robbers called it Bullion Bend for the valuable silver bullion that these coaches carried, and it was the site of at least one major robbery. The modern highway at that spot was not curved as sharply, but it was still treacherous due to the 40-foot embankments at the other side. When Chrissy and Nick's car rolled to the bottom, the fall was such that Chrissy did not survive. The vehicle hit tree after tree on the way down, and the roof was ripped off after the impact. Although Nick was relatively uninjured, he was now alone in the woods. For several days, Nick remained at the site of the crash, nestled in pine needles with almost no hope of rescue. On June 10, 1994, Deborah Hoyt and her husband were driving along Highway 50 late at night. The road was isolated and dark, and she remembers that they were singing to keep themselves awake. Suddenly, their headlights illuminated something shocking. There was a woman lying by the side of the road. The woman appeared to be completely nude. Her face was towards the road and she was lying on her side with her knees bent. The Hoyts were shocked and alarmed. Fearing that they just discovered a practical joke or some kind of trap to hijack their car, they drove past the woman and pulled over at the nearest phone booth to call the police. Within minutes, police arrived at the spot but saw no trace of anyone. Deborah was surprised. The woman had seemed to be asleep or unconscious. How could she vanish off the side of the highway so quickly? Had it been a trap after all? She was so unsettled by the sighting that she begged the officer, a local sheriff's deputy named Rick Strasser, to return in the morning to investigate the area in daylight. The following morning, Deputy Strasser returned to the Bullion Bend to investigate. At first glance, nothing was unusual, but upon further inspection, he discovered a single child's shoe lying at the side of the road. Just beyond the shoe was a steep cliff leading to a ravine. When the officer looked before, he saw the wreckage of a vehicle. Because the bend was in the area where Chrissy and Nick had been reported missing, he immediately suspected that the car belonged to them. It seemed like no one could have survived the accident. Still, the officer climbed down to check, where he made a shocking discovery. Nick was lying in the passenger side of the car in a fetal position, stripped naked and unconscious. However, he had a pulse and was breathing. Strasser quickly called an ambulance, and the victim was rushed to the nearest hospital. The doctors who examined him said that he may have only had hours to live if he'd not been discovered. Against all odds, he made it through 5 days and 4 nights alone. Tragically, Chrissy did not survive the accident. Crime scene investigators believed she was killed instantly upon impact. She was still strapped into the driver's seat and fully dressed. It was impossible for her to have been the woman on the road that night. However, the woman that Deborah saw has never been accounted for. Both the Hoyts and Chrissy's family have come to believe in an explanation that cannot be accounted for by science. They believe it was possible that Christine's spirit saved Nick that day by creating a ghostly sighting along the side of the road. Such a sighting, while eerie, is a testament to the absolute strength of a mother's love if it's true. Although Nick was just 3 years old and unable to provide a full account of his time at the bottom of the cliff, he did tell doctors and police that he had seen a bright light floating around that he called an angel. and that his mother had also been walking around, even though she was still inside of the car wearing a seatbelt. Nick also said that he climbed up and down the steep embankment, a feat which seemed impossible for a small child, but would explain why his shoe was on the road. To this day, nearly 20 years later, Deborah maintains that she saw something miraculous that evening. Deputy Strasser agrees and has remarked that, "I absolutely think something special happened here. I think it's a miracle. It's a whole series of events that I can't explain. I've often thought about it, I just don't have the answers." Nick, now an adult, is healthy and independent. He believes that it's thanks to his mother watching over him that he's still alive today. Number 4. Jolene Cummings was a single mother and cosmetologist based in Fernandina Beach, Florida. When she went missing in 2018, authorities suspected domestic violence. But the actual truth of what happened to the bubbly, loving young woman would come to haunt her community. A new coworker turned out to be someone else entirely, a cold-blooded individual capable of taking the life of a woman she barely knew. According to Jolene's friends, she was sociable and well-liked. She grew up in Nassau County, Florida, and ultimately settled down not too far from where she was raised by her mother and stepfather. After high school, she studied cosmetology in nearby Jacksonville, Florida. She also had a baby daughter who she was raising on her own. After learning the skills needed to become a hairstylist, Jolene moved back to Nassau County and got a job as a hairstylist at a salon in Fernandina Beach called Tangles. She built up a loyal client base through social media and word-of-mouth referrals. In addition to succeeding at work, Jolene was also building a relationship with a man named Jason Cummings. In 2013, the pair married and had 2 sons in the following years. Jolene's friends called her a devoted mother and said that she put all 3 of her kids first no matter what. In 2017, Jolene and Jason separated. Jolene shared custody of their 2 sons with Jason, and the pair were in the process of divorcing in 2018 when she mysteriously vanished. It's unclear why investigators may have initially suspected domestic violence in Jolene's case, as it seems that Jason and Jolene were working to stay amicable for their young children. However, Jason was the first person to notice that Jolene was missing on May 13, 2018. She failed to pick up her children from a week-long stay with Jason. Jason was concerned. Like Jolene's friends, he knew how devoted she was to motherhood, and he didn't think that she would voluntarily miss out on seeing her sons. He told Jolene's mother, Anne, and the following day, Anne called the police department to file a missing person case. It was Jolene's 34th birthday. It quickly turned out that Jolene had not been seen since May 12th, when she took a closing shift at work at the Tangles hair salon. Jolene had been working that day with Jennifer Seibert, a new employee whom no one knew very well. However, it was known that Jennifer and Jolene did not get along. According to reports, the women had argued, and Jolene thought that Jennifer was pretending to be someone she wasn't. On May 14th, as part of their routine investigation, investigators stopped by the salon to talk to Jennifer about Jolene's last known whereabouts. Jennifer was on her way to work when the salon owner called her to let her know the police were looking to speak with her. Instead of rushing in to help, though, Jennifer turned around and gave herself the day off. She then texted the owner, telling her that she was quitting. Finally, she called the police herself and told them that she couldn't be involved in the investigation in any way. Jennifer claimed that her ex-boyfriend was a stalker and a computer expert who would track her down if her name was on any official report. Police were suspicious of Jennifer's claims, but they couldn't find her to ask her more information, because the information she'd given her boss at the hair salon turned out to include a fake home address. All of this happened on May 14th, the same day Jolene was reported missing. On May 15th, Jolene's car, a beige Ford Expedition, was located in a Home Depot parking lot. Surveillance footage revealed that it had been parked there at approximately 1 a.m. on May 13th, just a few hours after Jolene would have left work. The driver was Jennifer Seibert. In the footage, Jennifer can be seen walking to a nearby gas station before entering a taxi. The gas station employee told police that Jennifer bought a bottle of water and used the phone to call the taxi. She had several fresh scratches on her face. Jennifer quickly became the primary person of interest in the ongoing investigation. Police put up a BOLO alert for her car, a black Kia Soul. Later that day, or on May 16th, she was found at a rest stop off I-95 in nearby St. Johns County, Florida. Jennifer had bandages on her face and hands and was sleeping in her car. She told the arresting officers she had run into a tree branch while riding her bike. At this time, Jennifer was charged with grand theft auto for stealing Jolene's car. However, police were also gathering evidence that implicated her in Jolene's disappearance and potentially even her death. The first clue that something had gone wrong at the salon were the scratches on Jennifer's face. Crime scene investigators had also conducted a routine sweep on May 14th and had found massive amounts of bodily fluid residue on the walls, chairs, cabinets, and sinks. Analysis indicated that it belonged to Jolene. Authorities also pulled surveillance footage from behind Tangle's hair salon. On it, Jennifer could be seen carrying heavy trash bags to a dumpster behind the salon on the evening of May 12th. By the 14th, though, the dumpster had already been emptied and the contents could not be located. Finally, Jennifer was also located on surveillance footage from a local Walmart on the evening of May 12th. She purchased 30-gallon trash bags, cleaning gloves, ammonia, and an electrical carving knife. The purchase of the knife in particular shocked investigators, including Sheriff Bill Leeper, who told news outlets that he was floored by Jennifer's cold-blooded activities. All of this information was coming together to paint a gruesome picture of what might have happened to Jolene. But investigators still wondered why Jennifer might have done such a thing. Could it have had to do with the argument that had recently happened between the two women? It was already known that Jolene and Jennifer didn't get along, with Jolene claiming Jennifer was pretending to be someone or something that she wasn't. It was Jennifer herself who finally provided the answer. After 48 hours in police custody, Jennifer told the police something shocking. In her videotaped interview, she said, quote, "When you run my fingerprints through, they'll come up as Kimberly Lee Kessler. I'm 50 years old and I've been running from the FBI for over 25 years. Jennifer's shocking confession was completely unexpected. However, investigators checked with authorities in other states and determined that Kimberly Kessler was a real woman who had been reported missing in Pennsylvania in 2004. In Jennifer and Kimberly's car, police found fake documents and ID cards for at least 18 different aliases. The documents showed that she lived in more than 30 cities in 14 states since the late 1990s. It's not clear why Kimberly first took a false identity. Her claim of being on the run from the FBI has never been substantiated. However, once her deception was uncovered, federal charges, including possession of a counterfeit passport, were added to her record. It's likely that Kimberly attacked Jolene because she was afraid of the truth about her identity coming out. Jolene had identified that something was off about the other woman, and Kimberly felt threatened. Police continued to uncover massive amounts of evidence as they dug further into the investigation. In addition to DNA evidence found at Tangle's, evidence of Jolene's bodily fluids was also found inside Kimberly's storage locker and on her boots and socks. Kimberly's phone also suggested that she had planned an attack. In the 2 weeks before Jolene went missing, Kimberly searched for things like coworker guilty of murder, missing person, body not found. In the 2 days between Jolene's missing person report and her arrest, Kimberly searched Jolene Cummings, or a variation of her name, more than 400 times. One search also included the phrase "no body, no crime." All of this evidence was enough to convict Kimberly Kessler for first-degree murder in the disappearance and death of Jolene Cummings. She's currently serving a life sentence in prison without parole. However, despite the best efforts of investigators, Jolene's body has never been found. It was likely placed in the dumpster behind Tangle's and taken to a local landfill, where searches have turned up nothing. Since then, her sons and ex-husband Jason have told local reporters that they go to a local public park to celebrate Jolene's memory, where there's a memorial bench in her name. Jolene still has no gravesite. Number 3. Odessa Carey, 35, was a patient of Community Mental Health Services in Ashington, Northumberland, England. Odessa has a long history of mental health issues and a record of violent incidents involving her mother, who was her primary caretaker. Odessa's mother, also named Odessa, was the primary caretaker for her daughter as well as two sons, neither of whom suffered from the same mental health issues that appeared to plague her daughter. According to Lawrence Cook, Odessa Carey Jr.'s brother, he suspected that his sister was a threat to their mother. He recalled talking to his brother and ultimately reporting his sister's behavior to authorities, telling them that she feared that Odessa Sr.'s life was in danger from her own daughter. However, it appears that minimal, if any, actions were taken. In addition, Odessa Carey Sr. did not want to be separated from her daughter. The 73-year-old, who had mobility issues and used a scooter to get around, was always supportive and refused to abandon Odessa Jr., according to the Daily Mail. Odessa Sr.'s loved ones had told her not to let her daughter into her house or be alone with her, but she didn't want to turn her back. Odessa Sr. had struggled with mental illness for years. According to her partner of 15 years, Sharon O'Brien, when the two met in 2006, her symptoms were not severe, but slowly something seemed to overtake the young woman. Odessa Jr. seemed to come and go in incidents of rage and fear, where she seemed to be another person entirely. Sharon watched helplessly as Odessa cut her own legs down to the bone or tried to smash her way through the wall of her home to get to the neighbors, who she believed wanted to harm her family. Odessa also experienced paranoia and at one point removed all of the light bulbs from her home because she thought they were cameras. She was eventually put under the care of the Green Acres Center, which is a mental health community facility run by the English National Health Service. However, Sharon thinks that Odessa never got the care she needed, and instead she continued to deteriorate. In 2017, Odessa Jr. was briefly held against her will in a hospital after she held Sharon and her mother hostage in Odessa Sr.'s home. In 2018, she attacked her elderly mother with a bathboard. Shortly after, Sharon convinced her to move in, hoping that she could keep an eye on Odessa Jr. However, Sharon saw fewer and fewer glimpses of the former Odessa that she once loved. Instead, Odessa would sit in the middle of the floor, laughing hysterically and screaming for hours. Multiple times, Odessa told mental health workers at the Green Acres Center that she was experiencing delusions, including the belief that her mother had been replaced by an imposter. However, she was never held against her will for more than a few days, nor was she formally diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia or another mental health disorder. Instead, healthcare workers reportedly chalked the issues up to substance abuse. Tragically, Odessa Jr.'s mental health issues boiled over in 2019. Acting under the delusion that an imposter had replaced her mother, she attacked her mother and took her life. Odessa Jr. used a heavy mallet to carry out her assault before marking her mother's body with religious symbols. The shocking aftermath to the horrendous crime was captured on video by CCTV cameras in the area. After Odessa attacked her mother, she used kitchen knives and scissors to remove Odessa Sr.'s head, which she placed in a plastic shopping bag. Odessa carried the bag with her for some time, and she can be seen walking with it along the quiet sidewalks of Northumberland on a number of CCTV cameras. She took the bag to visit with a family friend, and sitting in his garden, she unwrapped the head and kissed it. The friend was horrified and called Sharon, who quickly called the police. Odessa was arrested hiding in the attic of a nearby house. The owner has not been identified, and it's unclear if the home is Sharon's or someone else's. In video footage of the arrest, Odessa is subdued and dispassionate. Her mother's head was located in a cupboard beneath the sink of the home. Odessa has been ruled mentally incompetent to stand trial. However, a jury has agreed that she's responsible for the death of her mother, and she will remain incarcerated in a mental health hospital for the rest of her life. Sharon spoke to her and says Odessa continues to remain completely lost in the fog of mental illness. The woman she once knew seems to be gone. Odessa still believes that she killed an imposter, not her mother, and is asked to speak to her mother on the phone. In this tragic case that ultimately highlights the crucial importance of mental health systems, The attack could have been stopped if professionals took Odessa seriously, formally diagnosing her delusions or placing her on a psychiatric hold for her safety and the safety of others. Odessa's brothers have released a statement which says that they hope lessons can be learned from this tragedy to improve the healthcare system and spare other families from this devastating experience. Number 2. When she was just 13 years old, Alicia Kazakovich met a man online. It was 2001, and the heyday of the internet chat rooms was in its peak. Teenagers were not yet taught to be wary of the people they befriended, or at least not in the way that they are today. It was Alicia's story that changed that, making an entire generation much more aware of the dangers of an increasingly online world. Alicia had what she called an amazing childhood. She loved to sing and dance and was close with her mother and her older brother. It was her brother who first introduced her to the internet. He was a gamer, and he introduced her to the internet as a way to play games with other people. Alicia got a screen name and quickly got online. All of her friends were connected too, and they would spend hours chatting about anything and everything. She says that her parents taught her about stranger danger, but that it was about people you meet on the street, not strangers on the internet. On the internet, she was discovering a stranger could soon become a friend. Such was the case with one particular online buddy that Alicia met in the early 2000s. She said he was a boy around her age, and he was interested in all the same things she was. The boy was a good listener, and for months, Alicia would chat with him every night, telling him about her successes and failures and her hopes and dreams. Every night he comforted her and told her that he cared about her. But Alicia's confidant was no fellow teenager. In fact, he was a 38-year-old software engineer named Scott Tyree. Scott lived in a townhouse in Herndon, Virginia. He had a 12-year-old daughter with his ex-wife. He knew his neighbors well and was sociable with them. For some time, Scott had lived with the woman and her 2 daughters. In or around 2000, the woman and her daughters moved out. Although Scott didn't have primary custody of his daughter, she visited him over the holidays. On New Year's Day of 2002, she flew back to California to be with her mother, leaving Scott alone in Herndon. That afternoon, Scott made a 5-hour drive up to Pittsburgh. His reason? To meet his online friend, Alicia Kazakovich. Alicia had just finished a family New Year's Day celebration. Her mom made pork and sauerkraut, and the next course was dessert. Alicia told her mom that she had a stomachache and she wanted to lie down. But instead of going upstairs, she snuck out the front door and into the darkness. At 13, she was afraid of the dark and didn't usually go out at night on her own. The weather was cold and she didn't have a coat. She walked down the street for about a block, marveling in the silence that only fell after a cover of snow blankets the ground. Just as she started to get nervous, a man called her name. It was Scott. Alicia has not specifically said if she knew Scott was older before she met him in person. If she didn't, she was likely shocked by his appearance. Scott had long, thinning hair which he often pulled into a ponytail. He had a round face and a full, dark mustache. He could not pass for a teenager. When Alicia got into his car, she was immediately nervous. Scott, maybe sensing this, grabbed her firmly by the wrist and held it so hard that she worried it would break. He told her to be good and to be quiet as he sped down the quiet residential streets. At first, Alicia thought that they would just circle the block or drive around the neighborhood. But as the car kept going, the street names became unfamiliar, and she realized something was very wrong and she began to cry. Scott kept driving, even as Alicia hoped her crying would attract attention. After 5 hours, they arrived at his home in Virginia. Scott parked the car in his driveway and dragged Alicia into the house, down a flight of stairs, and into a basement room with a padlocked door. Then he seemed to change his mind. He brought Alicia upstairs to his bedroom and chained her to the bed with a collar around her neck. He kept her captive there for 4 days. Scott's predilection for internet use would ultimately prove to be his downfall. While he held Alicia captive, Scott broadcast his horrible activities online. A viewer recognized Alicia from a missing person poster that her parents had distributed and alerted the authorities. The individual gave the FBI Scott's screen name, and investigators were able to use this to track his IP address. The FBI arrived at Scott's home at around 4 p.m. Alicia was in luck. Just that morning, Scott had said to her, quote, "I'm beginning to like you too much. Tonight we're going for a ride." Alicia knew that this was a threat on her life. If investigators had not arrived at the home when they did, she might not have survived. When the FBI arrived at the home, Alicia heard the sound of banging and men yelling. She was convinced they were Scott's co-conspirators coming to attack her, so she rolled under the bed to hide. When the FBI entered the bedroom, they asked her to crawl out from under the bed with her hands in the air. When she emerged, they saw the face of the missing girl. They breathed a sigh of relief. Alicia saw the letters FBI on their jackets and knew that she was safe. They freed her from her chains and transported her directly to a nearby hospital. The following day, she was reunited with her family. Scott was eventually arrested and in 2003, sentenced to serve a 20-year sentence in prison for his crimes. As for Alicia, she's become a powerful advocate for teenagers like her, encouraging internet safety and tech literacy. At age 14, she and her parents started a nonprofit organization called the Alicia Project, which works to educate families and children of all ages. She also helped to pass Alicia's law in multiple states, which provided funding to internet crime task forces. Alicia's tireless advocacy has helped thousands of children across the country. For nearly 20 years, she's devoted herself to this work, even getting a master's degree in forensic psychology. In 2007, Alicia spoke in front of the U.S. Congress House Judiciary Committee about the dangers of internet sex crimes. She told the representatives that to this day, she continues to mourn for that child that was me, the child that was stolen from me. Make no mistake, that child was murdered. The boogeyman is real, and he lives on the net. He lives in my computer and he lives in yours. While you're sitting here, he's at your home with your children. Number 1. Kenya Monge moved to the United States from Honduras in 2004 when she was just 12 years old. She had been primarily raised by her grandmother, and her mother, who'd been living in the States since Kenya was a year old, was nervous about the transition, but Kenya seemed to take to the new environment immediately. She picked up English quickly and bonded with her stepfather and 2 half-siblings. Kenya and her family lived in Aurora, Colorado, a city located east of Denver. In June of 2010, Kenya graduated from high school, and she enrolled in a broadcast journalism program in Denver. She moved out of her parents' home and in with her boyfriend, Louis. On Friday, March 31st, 2011, 19-year-old Kenya and a pair of friends hit up the 24K Lounge, a nightclub in downtown Denver. Kenya and her friends were underage, so they made use of fake IDs to get into the club. After a few hours of drinking and dancing, Kenya left her friends to go to the bathroom. She asked them to watch her purse and phone while she went, but Kenya never returned. The story of what happened to Kenya that night is muddled and confused. Some sources report that she left on her own, while others say that she left with an unidentified man. Kenya's stepfather, Tony, says that he was told that she was asked to leave the club due to her level of intoxication. This was so out of character that he worries someone may have slipped something in her drink. It later became clear that the friends Kenya was with that evening were not a part of her usual group. Thus, when she became separated from them, they may have assumed that she met up with her boyfriend Louis, or otherwise made her own way home. Tragically, this was not the case. When Kenya failed to return home by the morning of April 1st, her boyfriend Louis became worried. He called her sister to check if Kenya was there, but no one had seen her. She wasn't answering the phone, which was with the friends that she'd gone out with the night before. It wasn't until that afternoon that her friends came to Kenya's home to drop her phone off and her purse, telling her parents and Louis that she'd left the items on a table in the club. The first clue to Kenya's whereabouts was a text message that Kenya had received from an unsaved number. It read, quote, "Hey, this is Travis, the guy who gave you a ride last night in the white creepy van. Did you get home okay?" Kenya's parents called Travis's number several times, but he didn't pick up. Frustrated, they went to the police to file a missing person report, but were told that they had to wait 72 hours. In the meantime, Travis was their only lead. Travis was Travis Forbes, a local man from the Denver area who worked at a bakery and as an entrepreneur, selling gluten-free granola bars. When he talked to Kenya's stepdad on April 2nd, he told him that he had seen Kenya on the sidewalk at about 2:30 a.m. talking to a homeless man. He offered Kenya a ride, and she told him that she wanted to go back to the club. When they arrived though, the club was closed, so he offered to drive Kenya home. According to Travis, as they drove out of the downtown area, Kenya decided that she wanted a cigarette. The gas station was closed, but Kenya accepted a cigarette from another man who was outside smoking. Travis said Kenya wanted to leave with the man, who she seemed to know. The pair walked off together, and that was the last he saw of her. Tony thanked Travis for telling him and called the police again, wanting to file a missing persons report, but the police told him it was too soon, since Kenya had last been seen in the very early hours of April 1st. In addition to speaking with Tony at length, Travis also offered to meet him at the gas station where he said he left Kenya. Tony was nervous to meet him but agreed, hoping he could find his daughter. Meanwhile, Kenya's mother was so nervous about Tony going to the gas station to meet Travis that she called the police, who agreed to send an officer out. When Tony and Travis arrived, they were met by an officer who asked both men what was going on. Travis reiterated the same story. The policeman then asked for a few minutes to speak privately with Travis. Tony stepped off to the side near Travis's van to wait. It was then that he noticed an extremely strong chemical smell coming from the van, similar to bleach. Police were interested in Travis's side of the story because he had a fairly extensive criminal record, and they wanted to make sure he wasn't involved somehow in Kenya's disappearance. As a teenager, Travis had been arrested for burglaring into 16 homes and businesses, and he spent time in jail for burglary. He also had a record of violence against women. In 2004, he was charged with assault for throwing rocks at female joggers. In April of 2011, when Kenya went missing, Travis was on probation for a domestic violence charge. He did seem to make a natural suspect in the young woman's disappearance. However, his story checked out. Before letting Travis go, the officer did look at his van, which he also noticed had a strong chemical smell. The back of the van also had brand new carpeting installed. Finally, on April 4th, Kenya's family were able to file a missing person report for Kenya. The police investigation began in earnest, and authorities worked to put together a timeline of the young woman's night. Investigators quickly discovered that Kenya could be seen on surveillance footage from outside of a condo complex called The Lofts. The footage depicted Kenya walking up with a mystery man, presumably someone who left the 24K club when she did. Investigators were able to identify the man, who said he and Kenya went back to his loft, but when they arrived, she changed her mind and said that he had to go back to her friends. Within minutes, she can be seen outside again on the surveillance video. Kenya seems intoxicated in the footage. She's staggering and walking with an unsteady gait. After exiting the building, she's seen in conversation with a nearby homeless man before walking out of frame. It's presumably sometime after this that she met Travis Forbes. Articles on Kenya's movements and the surveillance footage do not indicate that either the man who lived in the lofts or the homeless man were ever suspects in her disappearance. Then, on April 5th, the owner of the bakery where Travis worked made a scary discovery that would have major impacts on the case. The owner, Monica Poole, said she arrived at work on the morning of April 2nd and discovered that the surveillance cameras had been turned off. When she turned them on, the last recording was from the previous evening at approximately 7:30 p.m. On the footage, Travis Forbes can be seen wearing long latex gloves and rolling a cart into the bakery's walk-in freezer. On the cart was a white cooler that had been duct taped shut. Police quickly recovered the cooler from the bakery, however, it had been thoroughly bleached. Just like the back of Travis's van, there was also no physical evidence. Police also spoke to business owners in the area surrounding the bakery. One man told investigators that he'd seen two men burning something in a 55-gallon barrel on April 1st. Another said he saw Travis cleaning the large white cooler on April 2nd. When Travis's boss asked him about the footage, he said he turned the cameras off because he was going to change clothes. Despite this explanation, police were suspicious of Travis, and even more so when he abruptly left the state in late April. However, it wasn't until July of 2011 when there was a break in Kenya's case, and sadly, it was because Travis attempted to claim another victim. In Fort Collins, Colorado, 30-year-old Lydia Tillman was attacked in her own apartment. The assailant, who was a man that she didn't know, set her apartment on fire and left her for dead after the attack. Lydia, grievously injured, managed to jump out of her second-story window. At the hospital, her injuries were so severe that she was in a coma for over 5 weeks, but she survived and her attacker left a clue: DNA beneath her fingernails. Authorities tested the DNA and it matched to Travis Forbes. He was arrested on July 10, 2011. When he was brought into police custody, he was walking home with another young woman, potentially his next victim. Travis told investigators that he would tell them everything that happened on April 1st in exchange for a better deal and not being labeled as a sex offender in prison. On August 26, 2011, he confessed to taking Kenya's life on April 1st. In the early morning hours, Travis had been driving around with a friend when he saw Kenya talking to the homeless man outside the loft apartments. He pulled over and offered her a ride. Kenya asked Travis to take her to her boyfriend's apartment and he agreed. On the way, he dropped off his friend. Kenya eventually passed out in Travis's van and he attempted to assault her before ultimately taking her life. Afterwards, he placed her body in the white cooler, which he then stored at the bakery until he moved Kenya to a burial site near Interstate 76. He then burned everything in the back of his van in the 55-gallon barrel and bleached the van and the cooler. In September of 2011, authorities located Kenya's remains at the gravesite where Travis said they would be. On September 26, 2011, Travis pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. It's an unusual case that was made all the more baffling by Travis's choice to text Kenya on the morning of April 1st. If his number had not been in her phone, it might have taken investigators much longer to narrow in on him. As of 2022, Travis is serving out a life sentence, and he's not eligible for parole. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.